Hello everybody, it's your old pal Tuna and welcome back to another video. Today is not a vlog. Today I have for you a process video. I am going to take you through my thoughts and steps behind creating my pet portrait commissions that I've been working on lately. I had a big brain moment yesterday and packed the commission up to send to the commissioner without recording a little look what I did segment, so you'll have to deal with these spoilers in the meantime and keep watching to the end to see the final piece. Are you ready? Let's go. First things first, the material that I am using today is acrylic gouache. This is my favorite material and I am applying it onto a material called Claybord that I have coated in a thin layer of gesso. So the first step to creating this painting is to do basically an underpainting. I'm not going to do it in the traditional way where I would do a wash. I am starting from a white background, but what I do to give myself a base to work from is apply a medium to light coating of paint below. So I'm basically going to start building this up in values, and by starting with something in the medium range, I'm giving myself the opportunity to work into the darks and the lights when the time comes. And how I choose these colors is a little bit intuitive. I love my pet portraits to be in kind of pastel shades, so my goal here isn't to completely imitate the actual color of the pet itself, but I want to kind of interpret the colors that I see in the photograph and bring out richer and more diverse hues from those. So the colors that I'm using here are a yellow for the white, a kind of coral pink for the browns, and then something as well that I keep in mind at this point is that I am going to have the background be purple. That's something that I've decided ahead of time. I'm not going to apply it until the end, but knowing that it will be purple, that allows me to add a little bit of purple to the shadows as well. That'll be upcoming though. So the next step that I do is I'm going to start applying my mid dark tones. And here I'm using a nice brown. That's more of a realistic color that I'm using in this particular circumstance. And I'm starting in the top left corner there, basically doing kind of like a test area because I have a vision in my mind of how this will look, but since this is kind of an interpretive style of painting, I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. So I'm alternating my brushes and alternating in color tones to kind of like build up layers to see how it looks. And once I'm happy with the general range of the values and the colors themselves, I can start moving around the painting and applying them in layers essentially. And I know that I'm going to be adding my highlights later, and as well I'm going to save my darkest shades until later as well. So yeah, I start applying my midtones and carefully, you can see the photo in the top left corner of the screen that I'm working from. And so I'm trying to capture all of the markings. This was actually my first time painting a tabby cat, so it was a bit of a challenge, and I wanted to take my time to apply and make sure that, I mean, it looks like the pet. That's really what I'm going for at the end of the day. At this step, once I had all of the head patterns in relative good shape, I did want to go in and add just a little bit more detail to the face because of course that's going to be the focal point of the painting. So I'm using a finer detail brush here. I go into more information about the brushes that I use in my art supplies, what are my favorite art supplies, art tools video. So be sure to go check that out if you're curious to learn more about the brushes themselves. But I kind of am bouncing around, like once I have a specific color on my brush, like let's say I've mixed together a light pink, what I'll do is I'll kind of jump around the painting, applying that light pink wherever I feel like it needs to be. Part of this is to create a balance and not spend too much time focused on one portion of the painting, and part of it is just because it makes sense. With acrylic gouache, this is a permanent medium. It doesn't reactivate with water, so if I've mixed a color, I don't want to mix it and then leave it to dry on my palette. I want to use it up and not put any of that to waste. And yeah, at this point, I'm basically just starting to build values here and there. One of the main things that I wanted to mention is that you are gonna build your highlights from areas of shadow. So right now what I'm doing is I'm going into the white belly of the kitty, and adding like the darkest tone. So I look at the photograph and I think, where are the deepest shadows in the white? And then I'm basically applying that all over the white area. And what I'll do is I'll come back with the highlight white or cream and put that on top of the shadow. So it allows me to build that depth really effectively. And you can see that's where I'm adding in that purple tone as well for the first time that I mentioned earlier. So now I'm just going in on the opposite side and doing basically what I did on the left. But the fun part about the belly and the right side, the body of the cat, is that I don't need to worry as much about detail here. So I am just kind of trying to capture the feeling of the pattern. Again, because this is a tabby, there's some interesting qualities to the markings on the fur. And if I can be kind of interpretive and suggestive with my mark making, then it keeps me from getting too caught up in it being perfect. And because that's not the focal point of the image, it's more effective to just create those suggestive lines so you're not distracting the viewer from the face, which is where we're meant to be looking. And apologies, some of the stabilization in my video editing software is being a bit weird, so if you see anything, no you didn't, don't worry about it. So here I am coming back in with the highlights and the white. This is kind of like the last step, so I don't want to, well, it's not the last step. There's a little bit more to come, but I don't want to start adding my highest highlights until I feel pretty comfortable with the range of midtones, because these are something that I want to use sparingly to, again, kind of guide the spectator viewer's eye around the illustration. And if I have too many highlights, then it just ends up looking a little bit flat. So I've very strategically placed those white layers on the underbelly, and I'm basically at this point just kind of picking back and forth, making sure that I'm happy with the values everywhere, with the details, and now adding, like, wherever you add a highlight, that's where people's eye is going to be drawn. So be sure to be intentional, especially when you're doing something kind of semi-realistic like this. And the whole process here is to start loose, and as time goes on, get tighter and tighter and tighter. So it does feel kind of like there's a lot of backtracking, but it's more just layering and building up the detail. And you can see me, like, I'll put a little dab down and then I'll lean back and then I'll put some more dabs down, and that's just me trying to be really intentional and looking up at my reference to see, just scan different areas and see where I want those highlights to be. So now I'm finishing up the eyes. I really don't know why I left these until the last bit, because it looked quite creepy up until now. This cat has green eyes, and I didn't want to go too extreme. Sometimes it's fun to give cats like really bright green eyes to kind of pull out that detail, but in this case I wanted it to be fairly representative, and therefore I chose a nice deep kind of olive green to complement the yellow undertones and the browns. And from here I'm starting to add my darkest details. So this is something, again, that I use very sparingly, is like the lines, and I guess that's because really there is not line work in real life. So while these lines are not realistic to the photograph, at this point I'm making decisions that benefit the painting itself. So I'm going in and kind of accentuating the deepest shadows and the places where I need there to be a little bit of definition that I maybe wasn't able to capture with the values as they had been applied so far. And once I'm happy with those details, I'm going to go ahead and put in the black in just a moment here. So starting with the pupil of the eyes, this is like, again, talking about contrast, where you have your brightest whites and your darkest blacks. Those are where people's attention is going to be drawn, and especially where there are two of those things next to each other. So the eyes, you're going to have a dark pupil with a white shine highlight, and that's immediately going to become the most alluring part of the painting. And now that I have the black applied to the painting, I can adjust the values of the rest of the piece accordingly by just adding a teeny little bit of black to the darkest shadows and some of the areas where I want there to be a little bit more contrast and attention. But I think it's super easy for me to go overboard with that, especially as someone who does use a lot of line work in my other illustrations. So I'm trying to be like very careful about where I place it, but at the end of the day, acrylic gouache, because it doesn't reactivate, you can very easily correct mistakes. So if you do put something down somewhere and you're like, oh no, that's too dark, I've ruined it, you just go ahead and remix the color that you need, and yeah, start fresh. So here we go. Now I'm really happy with where the cat is. It's basically done, so I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the background with that purple that I knew in my mind I was going to use. And it's really nice because purple and yellow, those are complementary colors. So by using the yellows in the undertones, and then the purple in some of the shadows, and then the pink on the brown, the kind of pastel brown, it's all going to come together really nicely with this background. And I chose this pattern because the cat is like lying on a rug that has kind of a similar pattern, so I'm sort of duplicating that. I find the backgrounds very challenging on these pet portraits, and because I don't want them to be needlessly detailed to take away from the pet, which is the point. But I did go in and add a little bit more color afterwards. This is kind of my favorite part, where I kind of throw on like neon unrealistic colors just to sort of jazz it up and give it a little bit more interest. So right now I'm just using a pink, and I think I go back off camera and change this pink to be a slightly lighter value because I kind of want it to act as a highlight. And then I'll also, I think I go in with a purple as well, and then off camera again I added a bright kind of cyan blue, just a tiny bit of it. Oh, and as well here, I was feeling like the cat was a little bit floating in space too much, so I just added a tiny little shadow underneath the fur there. And I'm basically, with every new color or value that gets added to the painting, it kind of shifts how every other color is perceived. So with every change, I kind of look over the painting and see how I feel about the balance overall, and kind of pluck away at it one brush stroke at a time until I'm happy with where things are. We've been talking for a while. Well, I hope that this has been informative. This is basically the last step here, is just going back in with white to fill in these little geometric patterns here in the background. And yeah, as I mentioned, I did do a little bit extra off camera, and then I even like took the photo of the finished piece and did a little bit extra after that. It's one of those things where I kind of like need to sleep on a piece. It's a very important part of the process, is to give it time to ruminate. And sometimes I'll even reach out to the commissioner and kind of ask for their opinion and see if they want anything changed. But something fun about these pet portraits is that I'm a very preparation-based painter. So if you've watched any of my other videos where I'm doing like cartoon portraits, I always create a digital color sketch of kind of where I want all the colors to be, and I'll use the sketch to transfer onto the paper that I'm using. But with these pet portraits, I basically just go in, I'll do a really loose sketch on the panel and then start building up these layers as I go. And it means that the commissioner has to have a lot of trust in me to deliver. We decide ahead of time what photo to use as reference, and then I explain to them that, you know, I'm going to use this pretty directly, and if you need any minor changes at the end, I'm happy to do so. Thankfully, haven't had to do anything major yet. And the last thing that I do here is I add the whiskers in, because those are kind of like, I mean, they're so fun, and I don't want to, I don't know, I kind of save it, because it's my favorite part. But we're just coming up on the end here. Thank you guys so much for watching me put together this painting. I hope that in my ramblings here, you are able to gain a little bit of insight into my process, hopefully learn something. And yeah, stick around for the next video. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye.